Whispering Woods Adventure. Sunlight dripped through the canopy, painting the meadow in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Rusty, a blare of tawny fur, bounced through the tall grasses, his gaze fixed on a monarch butterfly flitting just beyond his reach. "I'll get you, Flitter-flutter," he chirped, his voice a breathless giggle. Ginger, perched on a moss-covered boulder, watched with an amused glint in her amber eyes. "Rusty, you'll never catch it that way. You're scaring it off with all your commotion." She smoothed her whiskers, the very picture of feline patience. Rusty, undeterred, launched into another pounce, only to trip over his own paws and tumble head over heels. He righted himself, a blade of grass stuck to his nose. "It's too fast," he whined, batting at the tickle. "Observe," a Ginger instructed, leaping gracefully from the boulder. "Patience is key. Watch how I stork." She lowered her body, her belly skimming the ground as she crept towards a plump field mouse nibbling on a foreland seed. Her movements were fluid, silent, a masterclass in predatory focus. Rusty, momentarily forgetting the butterfly, watched with wide-eyed admiration. The mouse, oblivious to the danger, continued its meal. Ginger tensed, her muscles coiled like springs. Just as she was about to strike, a robin burst from the undergrowth with a shrill cry, startling the mouse into its burrow. Ginger sighed, straightening up. Almost had it. Rusty, ever eager to please, puffed out his chest. "I could catch it. I'm faster than you." Ginger rolled her eyes. "Speed isn't everything, little brother. It's about strategy." A faint rumble, almost imperceptible, vibrated through the ground. Ginger paused, her ears twitching. "Did you hear that?" Rusty shook his head, distracted by a flash of blue near the babbling brook. "Look, Ginger. Blue butterflies." He darted off again, his attention span shorter than a hummingbird's. Ginger sighed, her gaze fixed on the darkening sky. The air felt thick, heavy with a strange stillness. Ignoring her brother's antics, she followed the sound of the brook, her instincts prickling with her knees. She found them there, near the water's edge, two older bobcats, their coats scarred with the marks of experience, sharing a freshly caught rabbit. They were a formidable pair, their presence radiating strength and territoriality. They glanced up at Ginger's approach, their eyes narrowed, but offered no threat. They were simply enjoying their meal, the brook gurgling a soft melody around them. Rusty, having abandoned his butterfly chase, bounded up to Ginger, oblivious to the tension in the air. "What are you looking at?" he asked, peering past her. He stopped short, his playful demeanor vanishing as he took in the sight of the older bobcats. He instinctively moved closer to Ginger, seeking her protection. The rumbling sound grew louder, closer, a low growl in the distance. The first fat raindrops began to fall, splattering on the leaves and turning the dust to mud. The storm's fury. The air, thick and heavy with the scent of damp earth, pressed down on Rusty's small frame. He swatted at a buzzing fly, oblivious to the darkening sky. Ginger, however, had stopped chasing butterflies. Her ears twitched, swiveling to catch the low rumble that vibrated through the forest floor. "Rusty," as she said, her voice unusually sharp, "we need to find shelter." He whined, digging his claws into a moss-covered log, reluctant to abandon his game. "But Ginger, I almost caught it." "Almost doesn't matter when lightning strikes," a Ginger retorted, her gaze fixed on the churning clouds gathering like a bruise overhead. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves into a frantic whisper. A fat raindrop splattered on Rusty's nose. He yelped, finally understanding the urgency in Ginger's voice. They bolted, darting between the ancient trees, seeking the meager protection of a rocky overhang Ginger had noticed earlier. The first crack of thunder ripped through the air, so loud it made Rusty jump. Rain lashed down, turning the forest floor into a muddy swamp. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. They reached the overhang, panting, only to find it offered little more than a slight reprieve from the downpour. The wind howled, bending the trees at impossible angles. Another ear-splitting crash echoed nearby. "We should have gone deeper into the thicket," a Ginger muttered, regret lacing her voice. Suddenly, a deafening crack split the air. The ground vibrated. A monstrous oak, its roots weakened by the relentless rain, groaned and toppled. Rusty screamed. Ginger shoved him with all her might, throwing him clear just as the oak slammed into the ground where they had been standing. A branch, thick as Rusty's body, pinned Ginger's hind legs. He scrambled towards her, his eyes wide with terror. "Ginger! Ginger, are you okay?" He pawed at the branch, but it was too heavy. He was too small. She whimpered, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Rusty, get away. It might shift." He refused. He pushed and pulled, his small muscles straining, but the branch remained immovable. The storm raged on, indifferent to their plight, trapping them beneath the fury of its wrath. The rain plastered his fur to his face, blurring his vision, but he didn't stop trying. Trapped. The earth roared. One moment, Rusty was chasing a plump field mouse. The next, the sky turned green as a titan fell. The ancient oak, weakened by the relentless storm, had finally succumbed. He felt a stunning blow to his flank as the world exploded in a shower of dirt, leaves, and splintered wood. "Ginger!" he cried, scrambling to his paws, a dizzying pain lancing through his side. Panic clawed at his throat when he saw her, pinned beneath a thick branch, her usually bright fur matted with mud and blood. "Rusty! Help!" Her voice was a thin, ragged whisper. He threw himself at the branch, digging frantically with his claws, the scent of crushed leaves and raw wood filling his nostrils. The wood was heavy, unyielding. He strained, muscles screaming, but the branch wouldn't budge. "I'm here, Ginger. I'm going to get you out." He circled the branch, desperate, looking for a weak point, any purchase. Rain lashed down, turning the disturbed earth into a muddy swamp. The wind howled through the shattered canopy, mocking his efforts. He tried to dig beneath the branch, hoping to create enough space to pull her free. The soil was thick with roots, slick and resistant. He clawed until his pores bled, but gained only meager progress. "Rusty, my leg." Ginger whimpered, her eyes wide with pain. He could see the unnatural angle of her limb, the bone protruding slightly through the torn fur. "Don't torque, Ginger. Save your strength." He redoubled his efforts, ignoring the throbbing in his side, the burning in his lungs. He had to get her out. He howled, a desperate cry ripped from his throat, a plea swallowed by the storm. He howled again and again, until his voice was raw and ragged. "Help! Someone, please! Help us!" Only the wind answered. The rain intensified, blurring the already fading light. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through his determination. They were trapped. The forest, once their sanctuary, had become their prison. He pressed close to Ginger, offering what little warmth he could, his heart a leaden weight in his chest. He wouldn't give up. He couldn't. Sarah and Max's hike. The early morning sun dripped gold through the leaves as Sarah adjusted her backpack. "Ready for an adventure, boy?" she asked, scratching Max behind the ears. The German Shepherd responded with an enthusiastic tail wag that thumped against her leg. Their usual Saturday hike through Whispering Woods was about to begin. Max, a handsome dog with intelligent brown eyes, bounded ahead, his nose working overtime. He inhaled deeply, savoring the symphony of scents, damp earth, decaying leaves, the lingering sweetness of wildflowers long past bloom. "Easy, boy," as Sarah chuckled, quickening her pace to keep up. "Don't want you running off after a rogue squirrel." The trail wound upwards, the air growing crisper with each step. Sarah paused, drinking in the view. The Whispering Woods lived up to its name. A gentle breeze rustled through the canopy, creating a soothing, almost hushed sound. "It's just breathtaking, isn't it, Max?" as she murmured, appreciating the vibrant tapestry of autumn colors. Crimson maples blazed against the golden hues of the birches, creating a masterpiece painted across the hills. They continued on, the only sound their rhythmic footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. As they rounded a bend, Max suddenly stopped, his body rigid. A low growl rumbled in his chest, his ears perked forward, focused on something in the dense undergrowth. Sarah's hand went to his collar. "What is it, boy? What do you see?" Max didn't break his gaze. He took a tentative step forward, then another, pulling gently against the leash. Sarah held tight, her heart beginning to pound. Max wasn't usually this agitated. Something was definitely wrong. "Okay, let's be careful," she said, her voice barely a whisper. She unclipped the leash, trusting Max's instincts. "Go on, boy. Show me." Max crept forward, disappearing into the thicket of bushes. Sarah held her breath, listening intently. A moment later, a series of frantic yelps pierced the quiet of the woods. They weren't the joyful barks of a playful dog. These were sounds of distress, of fear. Sarah pushed through the undergrowth, branches snagging at her jacket. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, but beneath it, she detected a faint, wild odor, something musky and unfamiliar. She had to see what Max had found. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. A cry for help. Sarah cinched the straps of her backpack tighter, the nylon rasping against her fleece. The wind whipped around her, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine. She paused, tilting her head. "Did you hear that, Max?" Max, a German Shepherd mix with a coat the color of sun-baked sand, had been nosing through the undergrowth, a picture of canine contentment. Now, his ears perked, swiveling like radar dishes. He whined softly, a low rumble in his chest. "Hear what?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected. The forest held its breath between gusts, and in that momentary silence, she caught it again, a faint, desperate cry, almost swallowed by the wind. It was thin and reedy, laced with pain. Max pushed deeper into the tangle of ferns and fallen branches, his tail now tucked low. He whined again, louder this time, agitated. He pawed at a thick mat of pine needles, then looked back at Sarah, his brown eyes filled with a plea she understood all too well. "It's coming from over there, isn't it?" Sarah said, her heart quickening. The cry came again, a little stronger, a little clearer. Definitely animal. Definitely in distress. Find them, Maximum, find them. Max needed no further encouragement. He plunged into the undergrowth, his powerful body pushing through the dense vegetation. Sarah followed, grabbing onto branches to keep her balance on the slippery, uneven ground. The forest floor was a chaotic jumble of downed trees and broken limbs, casualties of the recent storm. The cries grew louder, sharper, laced with a frantic edge. They led them to a hollow, where a massive oak had fallen, its branches splayed across the forest floor like shattered bones. Beneath one of the larger branches, a flash of russet fur. A bobcat, small and thin, was frantically clawing at the branch, its movements desperate and futile. Rusty! He glanced up at Sarah and Max, his eyes wide with terror and exhaustion. Ginger! He cried, his voice hoarse and weak. Help Ginger! She's trapped! Another cry, this one muffled and weaker than the first, came from beneath the branch. Ginger was pinned. Under the oak. Max pulled Sarah through the undergrowth, his low growls vibrating against her hand. The yelping had intensified, morphing into a high-pitched whine that clawed at the edges of Sarah's composure. He stopped abruptly at the base of the fallen oak, a behemoth ripped from the earth by its roots, its branches splayed like broken fingers across the forest floor. Easy, boy, she murmured, but Max was already pushing forward, nosing at a thicket of leaves pinned beneath a heavy branch. He poured frantically, whimpering in response to the desperate cries emanating from beneath the wood. Sarah pushed her way through the debris. The sight that greeted her stole her breath. A bobcat, lean and scarred, crouched beside a larger branch. Its eyes, usually fierce and golden, were wide with pain and terror. It wasn't yelping now, but emitting a series of soft, pleading meows directed towards the dark space beneath the wood. Rusty? Sarah breathed, recognizing the distinctive markings of the usually elusive creature that sometimes stalked the edges of her property. He nudged her hand with his head, then back towards the branch, a silent plea for help etched on his face. Beneath the branch, she saw another bobcat, larger and tawny-furred, her flank pinned by the weight of the wood. Ginger! A low, guttural moan escaped her throat with each shallow breath. Sarah's heart lurched. This was no minor scrape. Ginger was seriously injured. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers clumsy with adrenaline. Emergency services, as she said, her voice trembling. I need help. There's a bobcat, trapped here under a fallen tree. It's badly hurt. She gave her location, the words tumbling out in a rush. Please, hurry. Clicking off the phone, she knelt beside Rusty. It's okay, she soothed, though she wasn't sure who she was trying to reassure. Help is coming. Just hang on. She reached out a hand, cautiously stroking Rusty's matted fur. He didn't flinch, but leaned into her touch, his body trembling. The air hung thick with the scent of pine, damp earth, and blood. Above them, the wind rustled through the remaining leaves of the standing trees, a mournful song for a forest in distress. Waiting for rescue. Help is coming, as Sarah whispered, her voice trembling only slightly. Rusty, the smaller bobcat, whimpered, pressing closer to her leg. His fur was matted with dirt and a worrying amount of blood. Ginger, trapped beneath a thick branch a few feet away, let out a low, guttural moan. The air hung thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, underscored by the metallic tang of blood. Max, sensing their distress, edged closer to Rusty, nudging him gently with his nose. It was a clumsy, canine attempt at comfort, but Rusty seemed to understand, leaning into Max's touch. Sarah watched, a lump forming in her throat. The dispatcher had assured her that the fire department was on its way, but every second felt like an eternity. Easy, girl, as Sarah crooned to Ginger. We're going to get you out of there. Ginger blinked slowly, her eyes clouded with pain. The branch pinning her hindquarters looked impossibly heavy. Sarah cautiously circled around, assessing the situation. There was no way she could lift it herself. She unclipped her canteen from her belt. "Here, Rusty," as she said, unscrewing the cap. She poured a small amount of water into her cupped hand and offered it to him. He hesitated for a moment, then lapped it up gratefully, his rough tongue scraping against her palm. He looked up at her, his amber eyes filled with a desperate plea. "More," he seemed to say. Sarah refilled her hand and offered it again. He drank deeply this time, and she could see a flicker of renewed energy in his eyes. Turning toward Ginger, Sarah carefully approached her, kneeling beside the heavy branch. "Ginger, can you hear me?" as she asked softly. The bobcat blinked again. Carefully, Sarah dribbled water onto Ginger's nose. The bobcat flinched, then weakly licked at the moisture. It wasn't much, but it was something. Max, restless, began to whimper, padding back and forth between the two injured animals. He nudged the branch trapping Ginger, then looked up at Sarah, his brown eyes filled with worry. He seemed to understand the gravity of the situation, the helplessness of it all. Sarah stroked Max's head, finding comfort in his solid presence. "They're coming, boy," she murmured. "They're coming." But the forest remained stubbornly silent, save for the moans of the trapped bobcat and the growing anxiety in Sarah's heart. Freedom! The whine of sirens grew louder, a promise slicing through Sarah's anxiety. A fire truck, followed by an ambulance and a Parks Department vehicle, screeched to a halt at the edge of the woods. Uniformed figures spilled out, their faces grim but focused. "We've got 2 animals trapped," as Sarah called, her voice hoarse. "Under the oak. Bobcats, I think." A burly firefighter, his helmet gleaming in the dappled sunlight, approached her. "Show us." Max led the way, pointing to the fallen tree. The firefighter whistled softly. "That's a big one. We'll need to be careful." He barked orders, and the team sprang into action. Chainsaws buzzed briefly as they cleared smaller branches, their movements precise and efficient. A specialized crane, mounted on the Parks Department truck, was maneuvered into position. "All right," the firefighter said, after what felt like an eternity. "We're going to lift it slowly. Everyone stand back." The crane groaned as it took the weight of the massive trunk. Sarah held her breath, watching as the tree slowly rose, a fraction of an inch at a time. She could hear Ginger whimpering beneath the heavy branch. Max squeezed her hand, his knuckles white. Finally, a space appeared. Rusty, his fur matted with dirt and blood, crawled out, blinking in the sudden light. He was limping badly, his left leg clearly injured. He paused, disoriented, then tentatively took a step toward Sarah and Maximum. Ginger remained trapped under the branch. Carefully, firefighters used pry bars to lift the branch, creating enough space for her to scramble free. She emerged, favoring her right side, and stood beside Rusty, shivering. Both bobcats stared at Sarah and Max, their eyes wide and wary. They were injured, frightened, but something in their gaze, a flicker of trust, perhaps, stopped Sarah in her tracks. They cautiously approached, and sniffed at Sarah's outstretched hand. A new friendship. Sarah knelt, her breath catching in her throat as she examined Rusty. His fur was matted with dirt, but thankfully, she found no open wounds, only a slight limp in his left hind leg. Ginger fared similarly, a small scrape on her nose the only visible injury. Relief washed over Sarah, so potent it almost made her dizzy. "They seem okay, just shaken up," as she said, her voice trembling slightly. Max, ever the pragmatist, nodded. "Good. Let's get them some water and see if they'll eat." Each day after, Sarah ventured back to the clearing with Max, carrying bowls of fresh water and chunks of raw chicken. They placed the offerings near the edge of the woods, retreating a safe distance to watch. At first, Rusty and Ginger remained wary, their eyes glinting in the shadows as they cautiously approached the food. But hunger eventually won out, and they devoured the chicken, their powerful jaws making short work of the bones. As the days turned into a week, the bobcats grew bolder. Sarah and Max continued their routine, their anxieties slowly replaced by a tentative hope. The unspoken question hung in the air: could they truly befriend these wild creatures? One crisp morning, as they approached the clearing, Sarah noticed Rusty and Ginger were already there, sitting patiently in the dappled sunlight. Their eyes were fixed on Sarah and Max, a curious glint in their golden irises. Sarah hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. She placed the bowls down, her hands trembling slightly. Then, Rusty took a step forward, followed by Ginger. They moved slowly, deliberately, their bodies low to the ground. Sarah held her breath, unsure of what to expect. Closer and closer they came, until they were just inches away. Rusty nudged Sarah's hand with his head, a soft purr rumbling in his chest. Ginger followed suit, rubbing against Max's leg. Sarah gasped, tears welling in her eyes. It was a gesture of trust, of acceptance. A wild bobcat, a creature of the woods, seeking comfort from a human. In that moment, the boundaries between species blurred, replaced by a shared understanding, a connection forged in compassion and mutual respect. A new friendship had blossomed in the heart of the Whispering Woods.